I'll do my best to be quick too, but make sure you use hand gestures for me to move on fast. My talk today is a little bit of a big picture overview. So I'll briefly introduce who we are at the Office of Electricity. I'll tell you a little bit about my program, but then I want to share with you, let me stay close to the microphone, some of the, big picture thinking that we have around the concept of resilience. And very much look forward to your feedback. And I'll close by a series of questions. I know I should have come here with answers, but I have more questions than answers. And I would really like some discussions to follow up. Sorry, doing the wrong thing. So we are the Office of the Grid, as Ali mentioned. We really care about the system level perspective, right? Making sure end-to-end the grid is functional and working. And as a result, we work with a bunch of other mission offices all the way from ERE, energy efficiency, renewable energy, FE, and nuclear energy, a bunch of different offices who focus on sort of subsets of the grid, just to make sure the overall vision of the grid is taken care of. In our office, we care about the 4 tenets of our missions, include reliability, resilience, affordability, and security. And I recognize that this is not unique to our office. I think the Office of Economic Development was yesterday using the same language. Perhaps resilience was exchanged with sustainability, but I know that I'm not surprising anybody by saying these are pretty important tenets for, accelerating the modernization of the grid. But in my subdivision, we are starting to think of these as sort of branches of a strong tree rooted in contemporary risk science. And by that, I don't mean perhaps like a narrower definition or metrics of risk that are used in different engineering subdomains. What I mean is a holistic characterization of your undesirable scenarios, characterizing associated consequences. And note, I'm saying characterizing, not measuring or calculating, because it's not necessarily, some of it might be qualitative, depending on how much you know about your system. Of course, central, a lot of conversations have been about uncertainties, key to reflect the uncertainties, and everything, all of your estimation, characterization, calculations have to be conditioned on your current state of knowledge. I loved what you raised from it about, the level of confidence. Are we being transparent in reflecting in the underlying implicit assumptions that your models sit on about those known unknowns and unknown unknowns that are in your model? Are they being communicated? So I think that this is a whole picture of the risk. And if we think of these tenets, then I think maybe we agree that they underpin all these key 4 tenets that we discussed. And of course, resilience is highlighted because it's the focus of this symposium, and of course, something that I'm very passionate about. I think Ali had a beautiful slide on this as well. Sorry, you had to, so my less beautiful version of this. I joined DOE less than 2 years ago. And of course, I used to think of it as just an R&D institution, agency, but it's actually many more Ds, right? But anyways, besides funding research and technology, my colleagues work at length to provide technical assistance to the states, to stakeholders, as well as leveraging the convening power of DOE to bring stakeholders together to make sure as a whole we can accelerate and sort of fulfill the mission of the agency. And now about my program, thanks for saying the mouthful, transmission, reliability, and renewable integration. I think of it as like 3 main buckets of sort of the type of projects that we fund. And they're sort of overlapping, so this picture is not really great, but a part of it is fundamentals in risk and resilience, and then some sort of algorithmic innovations with specific project areas. We focus on wildfires, heat waves, sort of a slew of problems that you guys are concerned with as well. And of course, borrowing terms from our colleagues over at NSF, convergence research. By that, we mean not just focusing on academic work, academic research, but making sure that the knowledge co-production with stakeholders and decision makers happen early on in the conceptual phase of the project. And we do this with various different mechanisms, all the way from FOAs, prizes, and lab projects. And of course, we try to be intentional to not just focus on early stage research or late stage, but just be more strategic across the technology readiness level. Okay, now before jumping into that, so you see that resilience is being highlighted all over the place. And, you know, there have been a lot of beautiful conversations here today and yesterday as well about, you know, we talk about resilience, and then it's often followed by the notion that, but there are no widely accepted definitions of resilience. There are no industry accepted metrics of resilience. And we've been grappling with this as well, right? But we can all agree that if you don't have conceptual clarity, then how are you going to measure, monitor, benchmark, track, regulate? So we got to be clear about the concept. So we've been dedicating the past year in the office, just digging deep in the literature of resilience. We were experiencing a lot of deja vu, right? There's a lot of, you know, different definitions merging into one another with perhaps not great degree of clarity. And we were like, okay, how can we take a fresh perspective, take a step back and just read, and go beyond the resilience literature that is specific to the grid, and just understand like a bigger picture of like what it means as a concept to then how we can apply it for the grid. And of course, a lot of these concepts have been discussed earlier today, yesterday. But you know, the understanding that reliability and resilience are distinct, they're synergistic concepts, but they're not interchangeable, right? And being very careful and mindful about it. And it's interesting because, you know, there's a really rich history of reliability in the grid. If you go back, the engineering definition of reliability goes back to the 50s in the military handbook. And if you open any engineering textbooks, they're very consistent definitions of reliability. If you look at NERC's definition and, you know, other definitions that are used in the grid, they stay true to that well-accepted engineering definition of reliability. Rich history here. And of course, we talked about this yesterday as well. There maybe has to be some updates to some of the metrics of reliability that we work with to help us better manage the emerging risks. But for the most part, phenomenal history. I can say the same about resilience, right? And as we were digging into the literature, look, the rich history of resilience, systems resilience, goes back to the 70s from ecology. And I don't want to bore this crowd by how it then turned into socio-ecological systems and now socio-technical ecological theory of resilience. And but you see, there's a whole lot of other like engineering resilience, climate resilience, all of them that became in vogue like since early 2000s, and they've adopted key parts, but maybe not in its entirety. So as you see, grid resilience sits within engineering conceptualization of resilience that perhaps doesn't adopt everything from that. Oh, am I running short? Oh gosh, okay, so I have to, so we don't have an in-house definition of resilience, but this is not pick or choosing. It's not that my office is endorsing this definition, but when you dig in, you realize that, so digging in peer-reviewed articles and reports, the IPCC definition of resilience in 2018 stays true to sounds pretty in line with the generalized framework of resilience. So let's look at it. It's the capacity of systems to cope with hazardous events, respond, reorganize in a way that it maintains essential functions while maintaining capacity for adaptation, learning, and transformation. We don't hear as much. I mean, I love the many of the talks yesterday. Axel was talking about you know, the lessons learned, you know, the capacity to learn, and we are increasingly paying attention to adaptation. But things like transformation, reorganization, these things are not in our lingo. And there was a conversation of we got to stop being reactive and future-proof our grid. Well, if things like transformation is not in our lingo and we are not, we are just laser focused on response and recovery as interchangeable definitions of resilience, then perhaps it's not surprising that we are a bit reactive. Okay, so to get clarity, now this definition is not very clear, right? So I'll just tell you in 2 minutes how we are thinking about bringing clarity to this concept. One is to think of the resilience life cycle. You might agree that contrary to, well, reliability is more performance-based, outcome-based, resilience is more process-based. So let's look through the process. This is pretty similar to the trapezoids we saw yesterday, except it looks a little bit messy because, you know, real life is never beautiful like a trapezoid. It's messier. And you see that it's similar to what is being usually used but then we often miss the transformation. This learning piece, the preparation piece doesn't get, there's an overemphasis here. And by the way, there is a published article in Nature showing that overemphasis in response and recovery can entrench resilience traps. We got to look across the whole phase of the resilience. And by the way, you don't necessarily go back to your level of functionality before, right? You might end up, depending on what you do, you might end up in a better state, worse off state. You might actually do something maladaptive that you're slightly better off, but in the long term, because you're not accounting for increased intensity or frequency of disasters that are not reflected in your design criteria, then perhaps you're like investing something in minimal recovery and then you're worse off. But okay, so these are the phases, but what are the features, elements, key areas of resilience? So this is still not very clear, right? We want to know so how can we distill this into metrics that we can measure and monitor over time? Sorry, I have a lot of trees and flowers. I'm overcompensating by the fact that it's beautiful outside and we are stuck inside. But anyways, like response and recovery, I think we are good, right? Like there's a lot of, if you look at all the metrics of resilience, they all focus on response and recovery, much needed, really important. It's not surprising that they get a lot of attention, but there are other things like resourceful. Well, by the way, I've picked one word over the other. There are multiple different vocabulary in the literature that refer to the same concept. I think our friends over social sciences call these resourcefulness, maybe social capital, how the community, how people reorganize, how the technologies are marshaled, how information is exchanged to rapidly then contribute to response and recovery. I think what happened with Ali's presentation is a great example of resourcefulness aspect of resilience, right? Showing a great degree of resilience. But anyways, functional diversity, you know, a lot of distributed assets play into this. The example that we saw with the hybrid battery yesterday conversation, I think falls great into that. And then of course, you know, I've been drumming this beat about adaptive and transformative capacity. All right, so let me not go through these questions one by one because I'm running out of time and these are just questions. But what we are trying to focus on is, first of all, have conversations with our academic friends, industry friends, and try to get more concrete with those elements, features of resilience. And then we want to be able to understand better that the metrics that we are using, the standards, do they align well with the concepts? If not, we got to be transparent about what aspects of resilience we are not measuring and monitoring, right? We got to ask questions of well, assumptions and uncertainties. I mean, that's huge for me. And I think we are increasingly focusing on building capabilities of capturing not just stochasticities in the systems, but epistemic uncertainties that often get left out or not communicated well from the modelists to decision makers. And then also, do our metrics have to be retroactive? I think, Ali, you raised a really great point of like, you know, we've done a lot of great work with historical data moving forward. We don't see a repeat of history, right? You gotta do things differently. You gotta measure things differently too. Yeah, if you wanna measure as a benchmark how your system is doing, maybe, okay, so you use some historical data for your resilience metric calculation, but does that have to be the only, what is the expression, weapon? Well, the only tool in our toolkit? Anyways, a whole slew of other questions that I ran out of time, but I really look forward to discuss with you guys later, because we are thinking deep. We are going back to first principles, and we are trying to get very clear about what it is that we are measuring, what it is that we are overlooking, and we are thinking as Ali said, we are very intentional about being proactive. We don't want to just respond. We want to see what is coming down the pike 10, 15 years down the line. So we want to see what the flying squad says and where we got to invest our dollars to make sure we have reliable, resilient, affordable, and secure grid. And with that, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this symposium and appreciate the opportunity to share with you.